Welcome to Success at Scale, the podcast that covers business stories from experienced entrepreneurs, business leaders, and startup founders that know how to translate business ideas into business results. I'm your host, Greg Stein, and today we're going to talk to Kunal Gandhi, founder of EZPT. I can't wait for this conversation. This is one cool dude, so get ready. Kunal, thank you so much for joining us. So please, let's just start with a little background. Tell us about you, my man.
Hey, Greg, big thanks for having me. Love the energy. So a little bit about me. I'm from New Jersey. I grew up in a house where my grandfather was a stroke patient. And when we put him in a nursing home when I was 14, on the opposite side of the tree, my mom had a stroke. And so I spent a lot of time trying to learn about health and wellness. I became a personal trainer at 16 years old, and I started selling programs on a note. And that sort of evolved into, coaching people at my university. But I ended up injuring my back myself. And so that's a little bit about why we started EZPT, and I'll sort of get into the company and the details here to come.
That is amazing. I mean, quite a story. So like rewind for me for a second, right? You're a young guy. Were you into tech at the beginning, or like, how did this kind of all evolve and come together?
My dad had always pushed me to learn how to code growing up, and I never did. I thought I wanted to go into medicine to try to help people like my mom and my grandfather. And so I studied neuroscience and computer science at the University of Pittsburgh, and only picked up computer science to build this company, to be honest. And so basically, and no technical background prior to this company.
That's crazy. That's crazy. So now, has that proven to be a challenge, or is that maybe an advantage?
I think at the beginning it was a challenge, but just putting myself around really smart students at the University of Pittsburgh, there's a lot of great students in a great computer science program there, and they've really helped me learn and grow fairly quickly. And so, it just kind of worked out that way.
Awesome. So now let's get into EZPT. Tell us what it is, how it works, who it's for.
Absolutely. So EZPT is for anybody who can move their body. Anywhere from a stroke patient to an Olympic athlete can benefit from our app. And so what EZPT is we're a movement health company. If you set up your phone against a wall like you're making a TikTok, it'll track 20 points on your body, 20 on your hand, 15 on your face, and give you the exact exercise programs and real-time feedback when you perform the exercises.
That's killer. So, what's funny, I personally broke my ankle at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like the worst, right? Because, it was pandemic time. It's crazy. Anyways, in the scheme of things, look, it's nothing compared to what most people were dealing with out there. So I'm thankful. But no, I broke my ankle and I went to physical therapy, right? And it was like, to me, it was kind of like a joke in a way, right? Like I was like, there were sessions that I went to where they're like, okay, we're just going to measure now. And they don't actually do anything, right? And I was like, what's the point of this, So are you kind of filling that void?
Hey, Greg, that's exactly what I went through. So when I went to physical therapy, I'd seen about 15 for my back. No one could fix me. And I'm a young guy. I'm 22 years old. And so having back problems at my age doesn't really make sense. When I'd go there, they take out this protractor looking device called a goniometer. And so they would say, hey, how far can you bend your back? And every PT that I went to would give me a slightly different reading. And days that I felt better would give me worse readings than days I felt worse. So sometimes there was a lot of confusion. And so we thought this archaic method needed to change, and using computer vision and motion analysis, kind of like how they do in Disney, we basically are able to create objective measurements as opposed to the subjective measurements that our naked eye can use.
That's crazy. So now what stage is the company in right now?
Yeah, so we've raised a pre-seed round of funding, and we're growing fairly quickly. We have a team of 16 to 65-year-olds. So the 16-year-olds will make our TikTok, and that's where we're getting all of our traffic and growth. It's all organic. And then the older guys on the team have been former CEOs at large insurance companies and healthcare companies, as well as employee benefits. So it's a wide range of talent, and I think that's what makes our team so unique. It's a very diverse group.
That's so cool. And how are you bringing these people together? How are you finding them?
Honestly, when we first started the company, my co-founder Jay and I, Jay's down at Georgia Tech and he's down in Atlanta. We met at Pitt, and when the pandemic struck, we just finished a startup competition. And with the small amount of capital we had, we would go we'd go reach out on LinkedIn to PhD students who had their internships canceled at Google or wherever they wanted to work. And we were like, hey, we're working on this really cool project. It's something that you could at least put on your resume, if nothing else. But if it works out, you'll be able to, maybe change millions, if not billions of lives. And, that's been our mission from the beginning. It's to reduce pain and get rid of, back pain and neck pain and shoulder, knee, and hips. So LinkedIn cold outreach was the start. And then as we started to bring more and more people in, they'd bring in their friends and be like, hey, like, we're making a real change here. I'll tell you a quick story. So I remember I 2 days before my MCAT, we started working with a professor over at Stanford Medicine. And so, this was, to me, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. So I packed my bags up, told my parents, hey, like, I'd love to be a doctor, but I think that this path is sort of the right path for me. They were totally on board with it. So I ended up moving across the country. And, after living there for a month or two, I went to the same burrito spot. It's called Taco, Tacko. I'd go there every day. And one of the cash register ladies comes up to me while I'm sitting there eating. We used to be called Simple back in the day. So it's a little infinity logo. And so I'm sitting there eating my burrito. She comes up to me. She's like, hey, how are you doing? I always see you here. And I'm like, I'm doing well. She's like, I love that app. I love that app on your hoodie. And at this point, maybe we only had like 1,000 or 2,000 people on the app. And I could tell she was from Europe. She mentioned she was from Slovakia. And I was like, there's no way you've heard of this app. I just don't believe you. And she's like, no, I have that app. I'll show you. It's on my phone. I said, what's it called? And she's like, I don't know, but I can show you right here. She pulls up the app right on my phone. And this was like one of those days when we were like, should we pivot? Should we work on, it was never like, should we quit? But it was like, should we try a different market? And in that moment, it was like, wow, like we have to keep going. And Jay and I are just young guys trying to figure it out. And so, I mean, it's just been an incredible journey, blessed to have a good team.
That's awesome, man. I mean, the startup journey is something we should talk about here, right? Because, you start on this journey, you think one thing, something else happens, right? It's never exactly what you think. You're always trying to plan ahead and, all this, but like, it's kind of unknown, right? And you do need to pivot along the way. What has your journey been like? Like, what's the ups? What's the downs,
Yeah. Well, I'd say at the earliest of stages, we would try to get validation from these startup competitions. Because again, we had no money and we'd go to investors and they'd be like, yeah, like we're not going to give hundreds of thousands of dollars to a little kid, basically. Right. And so I could tell that, at least from my perspective, there was a lot of frustration because I'd start to see other companies start to gain momentum that were doing similar things. And so, we were, when we first started working on this, we were first, and we felt like we wanted to use that as an advantage. And so that was the biggest, I'd say, up or down that we'd face. But then when we win these competitions, and I think we placed in about 15 or more of them, and that sort of helped us get the ups. But we'd start to tie our self-worth and validation in these competitions. And so after we sort of removed ourselves from that and been like, hey, we need to start actually focusing on user growth, and we need to actually start focusing on the impact that we're making in people's lives. That's when the ups and downs started to go away, and we started to become better leaders for our team and say, look, let's just stay neutral and continue to progress one day at a time.
Oh, man. So let's talk about other, digital health apps. I mean, it seems like there's always, something else happening in the digital health space. And, how do you, stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? And, how do you tie in like artificial intelligence and computer vision and all these other concepts? How do you kind of bring that in?
Yeah. In terms of other companies that are out there, there's a couple I'm really excited about. And I'll tell you why I'm excited about them. They are bridging physicians and day-to-day sort of providers. And when I say day-to-day providers, I mean your trainers and nutritionists. Our company is different because we bring orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, and trainers together. But then in the nutrition side, there's companies like there's one called Found, which I'm really excited about. The Bumble COO left and started this company where she basically has MDs in a group chat with your nutritionist. I think that's the direction of the field, and that's where things are going to start going. So bringing it back to EZPT, let's say you're an injured athlete, right? And an athlete could be any age, right? And an athlete could be someone who works in a warehouse, someone who works as a nurse. But basically, you got low back pain. And so you sign onto our app, you go to PT, you do the virtual assessments and such. And, it could either be escalated or de-escalated. Escalated meaning you need surgery, de-escalated meaning, hey, I'm done with physical therapy. Let me go to a trainer. Because right now, when you run out of physical therapy sessions, they throw you back in the fire. You go back in the gym, you hurt yourself again. And that happened to me like 6 times. So
I can relate. I told you my ankle, it's still not what it's supposed to be. It's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what makes us different. I think bridging the healthcare professionals with your trainer, your day-to-day health coach, and making that real continuum is our mission at EZPT.
Yeah. And so like, how do you get someone to stay with it? Right. Because the problem I think that you're really trying to solve here is getting somebody to stay with you for a longer period of time, other than just going to a session or logging on and logging off. Right.
Adherence is the number one problem across, I think, all of any app that exists or health, in healthcare. I think it's one of the biggest problems that everyone's facing. And so what we've fundamentally built our app with is these principles of gamification. The way that you play Mario Kart for hours and other things. A lot of our team members grew up playing video games, and I did a little bit, I'll admit it, but what I'll say is it's really addicting getting rewards and incentives. So we have streaks where if you work out for a number of days in a row, this little fire emoji will start counting, and all of that data gets sent back to your PT or your trainer, and they can actually see, hey, this person's on a streak. We also have an adherence ring. We took some inspiration from Apple Watch and others that use rings. And in our case, it's, hey, did you actually complete your workouts out of the 7 days? Out of 100%, how many were you able to complete? And so if they start dropping, we'll see them turn yellow. And if they aren't doing workouts, we'll see them turn red. And the PT can go into their dashboard and ensure that they're progressing safely.
Makes sense. What do you think is the biggest challenge that, the healthcare industry is facing today?
I think the biggest challenge that comes to mind for me is prioritizing care and optimizing that for costs, right? Like realistically, to perform a surgery, it shouldn't cost $1 million, right? Like the tools that are being used aren't $1 million worth of tools. It's the time of the surgeon and the entire insurance game. I think it's really tricky to basically optimize the two, time spent and cost of surgery. And so that's like one thing that I'm really particularly passionate about, because there's so many people out there suffering from chronic pain, and whether they need surgery or they don't need surgery, they might not have access to the care that they're looking for. And so another principle that we're really building EZPT on is, hey, if you have a smartphone, iPhone or Android, you can pick it up and stream content helping you with your chronic pain, or get access. In the future, we're going to be having our providers on there. You'll have access to these providers and be able to have a conversation with someone immediately.
Makes sense. What is if there was one thing you could do to change the whole healthcare space, what would it be?
There's so many things that come to mind here. I think the biggest, another topic I'm really passionate about is data privacy. And also, from the patient side, letting them know that, hey, you giving your health information to companies in general is actually a good thing, because we'll be able to make better predictions and, give you more preventative care. I think on the healthcare side, they should be incentivizing people more and more for taking care of their health on the preventative side. So, if you work out regularly, employers are starting to give incentives, but I think, increasing those incentives in different ways and new creative ways will essentially boost adherence and solve some of these problems. If you think about MSK, musculoskeletal conditions, so pain, it's about 4% of the GDP. It's about $1 trillion spent last year. And when you think about healthcare as a whole, it's 20% of the GDP. So pain, heart disease, obesity, these are like some of the biggest issues that the country is dealing with. And if we could reduce that spend, we could start investing more in creating new jobs and building new technology. And, I think maybe lowering our gas prices,
Hey, no, that's a whole other can of worms these days. Well, no, I love it, man. I think you're really, thinking about things in a broader sense. And I applaud the way you're thinking about it. I think there's a lot of moving parts in the world of healthcare right now, and I love your thought process around the applying technology and gamification in such a way that actually you're solving a real problem that exists. I'm telling you, I would have loved it from my ankle. I'm bringing it back to me, but I'm telling you, it would have been nice to have. Anyways, I digress. We went out way out into healthcare. We've talked about technology a little bit. Let's come back to you as a startup founder, as somebody who's kind of leading the shift here. What do you think is the most important lesson that you've learned as a startup founder?
Being relentless. I talked about this on a TikTok I made the other day. Tim Grover, who trained Michael Jordan, wrote this book called Being Relentless, and he talks about there's basically three types of people. Coolers are people who can't really get it done. Closers are people that try to get it done and then celebrate their victories and feel like the world's amazing and until the next challenge hits them. Cleaners are people who just get things done and they move on to the next thing, like the way that Michael Jordan was, and guys like LeBron James are now. And I think as a startup founder, like we talked about earlier, like highs and lows are going to hit, and so staying level headed and like that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned over the last few years, and it's still something I'm constantly working on. But just being absolutely relentless is key.
What does that mean? Is that grit? Is that being relentless? What does that mean?
Yeah, I
Is it
think
discipline? What is it?
it's all of them. Hustle culture and stuff you see on these platforms usually are like don't sleep and stay up and work all day. I think it's quite the opposite. It's get enough sleep so that you could perform at the highest possible level, and eat properly and work out regularly. Not because yes, there's physical benefits of it, but mentally, you have to perform at the top of your game as a founder. Your entire team is counting on you to be a sharp decision maker and an effective leader. And so those are just basic habits, and you set the bar for your team. So I wake up thinking, hey, like what activities can I do that's going to be essentially pushing the team and pushing the boat forward, and being relentless and being gritty and just not giving up. And again, I think of Dave Goggins, like just running and running and running as far as you can, because it is a marathon. That's what I think about when I think about being relentless.
Well, it's so interesting too, because I do think that there's this startup culture that being relentless is misinterpreted. And you started to touch on this a little bit by saying getting enough sleep. I think you're right, which is to be, find the whole self. But there's actually something else that's been born in startup culture, which is to be relentless in such a way that it's kind of like a show, right? And to me, it's so counterproductive. Rather than, there's a phrase that they use, the tagline at Berklee College of Music is to be rather than to seem. This is something that I embrace and live by on a very regular basis every day. And I just see but there's this whole culture of startups and unicorns that have just, skyrocketed. And then you realize that actually they're just totally full of shit. Right. So that is being relentless too, is it not?
I 100% agree with you. It's, there's a lot of noise out there, but at the end of the day, I applaud the founders that are trying. At the end of the day, they're trying their best, and they signed up for the hard road. A lot of people think that it's all glory and it's all raising a bunch of money in the startup space. And maybe for some people it is, right? But at least in my experience, we had the work, and for 3 years, we've launched 3 times. Our third launch is coming up this week. We've, throughout all the work that we've done over and over, had no incentive for the first 2.5 years. We didn't pay ourselves. And, it's not all glory until the end, until you literally are ringing the bell or, you're exiting. And I don't know. I totally agree with you. I think you're spot on to be and not to seem it's a great quote.
Yeah. So on that note, so where do you see yourself in 5 years from now, right? Like now you've been grinding on it. You've launched 3 times. You're going to launch 5 times, 10 times, whatever it is. But, cool. Where are you in 5 years from now?
I can't predict the future, but what I can tell you is I want to be somebody that inspires the next generation of young founders. I think at the end of the day, I look at some of the folks that were 27 and they might have been fitness creators like Christian Guzman's and Steve Cooks of the world that were doing YouTube back in the day. Like those were guys that I grew up following. And like now my mentors or the idols that I sort of used to follow had changed. But I just want to be someone that 19-year-old Kunal could look at and say, hey, I could do this too. Not idolize. I want them to say, I could do this too. And, as I've started to meet some of these creators and folks that I used to like look up to as a kid, I'm like, these guys are human. And so I want to be someone who's just, very approachable, very human, and someone that could, just be a voice for younger folks that are trying to, build a startup and make a difference in the world.
Let's say that young person is sitting there right now listening to you. What's the one piece of advice you would give them right now that has really helped you achieve all the things you've been able to?
So at the University of Pittsburgh, they had this big idea advantage fund, and they invested in our company. The guy named Dave Toth started Net Ratings. He's my coach right now. He's my go-to. And Dave always says, keep a high do to say ratio.
That's cool.
Say you're going to do certain things, do them, and then do even more. And so that's just the advice that I would pay forward to anybody listening. Keep a high do to say ratio and always push yourself to keep going. Because at the end of the day, like at a startup, you're competing with yourself. You're not competing with the guy next to you, and it's you in the mirror. It's kind of like going to the gym. And so,
well said. Well said. Now, what about somebody who's out there right now? Look, it's been crazy, unpredictable times, right? And so not everybody's having a good time right now. So, what would you say to someone who's out there right now who might be, struggling and trying to get up off the mat?
I think, a lot of people ask about the, glass half full or glass half empty. To me, it's like, if you have a glass, you have a glass. Hold the glass and fill it with whatever you can, and stay hydrated. Keep pushing. That's how I think about it.
I love it. I love how you kind of think like an athlete in the world of business, right? And you mentioned that earlier, and I really am hearing that kind of resonate in everything that you say. It's high performance athletics in business, and I love that kind of takeaway.
Yeah, I think like I said earlier, you have to be at the top of your game because people are counting on you. And that's not only your teammates, but your customers at the end of the day, your users. Like they need this app to exist. I know, chronic pain affects so many people, like, and they're older than me. I still have energy, people that are in their 60s and 70s, like my grandfather, he'll do like light stretching and this mindful movement sort of notion of, it's like meditative movement that is what we want to provide at the end of the day. And and they need it. So we have to perform.
So what's next for EZPT? What's next?
Yeah, we want to be the world's movement platform. Anybody who has access to a computer, a smart device, they'll be able to receive the exact exercise program for their body.
Well, that sounds like it is something that is absolutely much needed. And I'm super glad that you're out there every day hustling and grinding with tenacity to get it done. Well, Kunal, I got to say, man, it has been such a pleasure, connecting with you today. Where can people find you and EZPT online? This is your shameless plug right here. Do it, man.
Yeah. So my Instagram, Kunal Gandhi 99. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm posting a ton. I have a new series coming out on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at the Kunal Gandhi. I'm on TikTok. You can search me up, Kunal Gandhi. And then if you go on ezpt.xyz on Instagram, EZPT app on TikTok, and you could find us basically anywhere. EZPT, it's just 4 letters, so you'll find us no problem.
Well, EZPT is pretty badass. Kunal Gandhi is even more badass. And I'm so glad we got to connect and get to know each other today. Hopefully this is the beginning of a much larger conversation. Thank you so much to everyone who's listening. Thank you so much, Kunal Gandhi, for joining us. And to be continued, my friends. So this is Greg Stein signing off with Success at Scale with Triple G Ventures. We hope to find you next time. Until we do, please like, share, subscribe, do all that social media good stuff, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
Peace.